It's something we've all dreamed of, working for a division of government so top secret, even your family and friends don't know what you do. And no, I'm not talking about the CIA or Area 51, we're talking about the SCP Foundation. The only thing that keeps this world from complete destruction and chaos. And today we'll be answering the question, what if you worked for the SCP Foundation? How's it going, guys? Welcome back to LBQ. I'm your host, Jared Bronstein, and before we get into this one, let me know in the comments below which SCP you'd want to work with if you got a job with the Foundation. As always, we got bonus content to wrap this one up, but for now, we need to get right into it. So it seems there isn't much information out there when it comes to hiring process or working for the SCP Foundation in general. There are a few SCPs that describe certain levels of how important staff are, with the higher tiers being the most protected and prestigious. More specifically, as per the SCP Foundation's website, I quote, "Class A personnel are those deemed essential to Foundation strategic operations, and are not allowed direct access to anomalies under any circumstances," end quote. Whereas Class D reads, I quote, "Class D personnel are expendable personnel used to handle extremely hazardous anomalies and are not allowed to come into contact with Class A or Class B personnel," end quote. There's even a Class E, and I'm sure you can imagine where they stand in the rankings. So if you were to work for the Foundation, you better hope you're of significant importance to them, otherwise it's very possible you don't last long at all. More specifically, you die a horrible death at the hands of an SCP they're trying to study. But what would the hiring process even be like? It's quite possible the SCP Foundation selects their staff based on how they performed at prior government or classified jobs. It's also possible they hire directly out of school, trying to recruit some of the top researchers and scientists all over the world. But if you're lucky or unfortunate enough to get an interview with the SCP Foundation, depending on how you look at it, odds are you'd need to take the job. And if you denied the job, I have a hard time believing they would just let you walk. It's more likely than not, upon you denying the job, you're given an amnestic and forget that the Foundation even exists. It's also very possible they ask you again, well aware of why they didn't succeed in persuading you to join them the first time around. Let's say you do accept the job, now what? Odds are your family wouldn't be allowed to know what you do for work. Or at least for the lower class personnel. It's quite possible you need to fake your death, so as far as your family and friends are concerned, you're no longer around. That way, if for example you're a Class D personnel and end up dying on the job, the Foundation doesn't have to answer any questions. Everyone's already under the impression that you're dead. Simple as that. For the higher class personnel, it's quite possible you work with your family or partner. Again, I find it very hard to believe that they would allow you to work on a top secret classified case, or SCP, and then allow you to go home and trust you won't say anything to anyone. It's more likely than not, the most you could do is call your family to let them know you're okay, but are working for a classified organization, and that's about as much as they'd be allowed to know, if the Foundation would even allow you to do that much. Similar to the way specific levels of CIA and other government employees can't reveal, see, or speak to their families too often, the same would go for you if you worked for the SCP Foundation. But when it comes to taking care of your family, I have no doubt they would be treated like royalty. Considering how you'd be working such a prestigious job, assuming you're one of the top tier personnel at the Foundation, they would ensure your family is taken care of. In all aspects, from financially to general safety, the Foundation would want you to feel at ease knowing you couldn't be there for your family doing the things a normal husband, wife, father, or mother would do for their own. If you work for the Foundation your whole life and make it to a point that you retire, it's quite possible they set you up with a great retirement plan and wipe your memory before they officially let you go. Assuming the Foundation would treat their top personnel with respect even after decades of service, I find it very hard to believe they would just dispose of you. As previously mentioned, if you're a lower class personnel, say C, D, or E, well, you'd not only be expendable, but you probably wouldn't be given the same perks, nor would your family, as someone Class A or B. So you just better hope the Foundation sees something in you from the get-go, or you're able to convince them that you're a vital part of the team. Otherwise, your days working for the Foundation would be quite limited. There are also quite a few positions at the Foundation which can range from a security officer or field agent to a site director or O5 council member, which is the cream of the crop. So as you can see, if you worked for the SCP Foundation, how things would play out would simply be based on how valuable you are or potentially could be to them. Personally, I wouldn't want anything to do with them because even if you're a top dog, it's quite possible an SCP breaks containment and destroys everyone and everything at its site, including you. Home invasions are a scary reality. They happen all over the world, and sometimes they involve just stealing. Other times they involve murder or abductions. Unfortunately, in the case of SCP-4666, they involve both of those things. Described as an extremely thin, elderly male of European descent, standing anywhere between 6.5 to 7.5 feet, SCP-4666 is your worst nightmare. Always completely naked, this humanoid-like being shows no mercy when it attacks. So buckle up as we dive into this one and ask the question, what if SCP-4666 was real? Now, SCP-4666 has also been referred to as the Yule Man because he is only active for 12 days between the dates of December 21st or 22nd until January 1st or 2nd, similar to the 12 days of Christmas. But this is not the kind of thing, or creature, or being that you'd want to see during the holidays. In fact, you'd never want to see this thing at all because if you do, it'll be the last thing you lay your eyes on before your inevitable, gruesome death. Referred to as the Wisenocked events, SCP-4666 attacks homes in isolated, rural locations which include a family member under the age of 8 and in an area where snow will be on the ground for the 12 days. What's even more interesting is SCP-4666 is able to instantly teleport to any location north of 40 degrees latitude, although it's possible it may be able to travel anywhere on Earth. It's unknown what other abilities this SCP has, but one thing is for sure, it has no remorse. The Wisenocked events usually proceed as follows. Nights 1 to 7 will include the children of the chosen home seeing SCP-4666 near their home, whether it be in an open field behind a tree or possibly at their window watching them sleep, which has been previously reported. Nights 8 to 11, family members, including parents, now will start hearing footsteps on their roofs and in their attics. They will smell a very unpleasant smell as well, leading some to believe their home has possibly become haunted. And then on the final night, one of two things happens. In most cases, SCP-4666 will kill the entire family with the exception of one child, always under 8 years old, who it will abduct. SCP-4666 will injure the family to the point that they can't fight back or escape, and place them all in the same room, torturing them one by one while the others watch. The way SCP-4666 kills ranges from event to event, but it's almost always gruesome and horrifying. The other scenario, which happens about 15% of the time, is also quite horrific. Family members will start hearing footsteps inside their home at night, although no signs of forced entry will be present. The next morning, the children in the home will find toys at the ends of their beds, crafted from the remains of human children who fell victim to SCP-4666 previously. Law enforcement has been able to get fingerprints of the being responsible for these horrific crimes, which date back to as early as the 1st century AD in Scandinavia. Unlike humans who have a unique whorl pattern on their fingertips, this humanoid creature has a very unique double whorl pattern. The same prints that were found at all Foundation investigated scenes matched a print found in dried blood from a similar instance which occurred back in 1873. The Foundation has also been trained to suppress or falsify any media coverage of these crimes. Instead, they will make it appear to the general public as a home invasion murder. Any evidence found by non-SCP members are to be confiscated, and the subject who found said evidence will be amnesticized, having no recollection of what they saw or stumbled upon. This is clearly the SCP Foundation's way of trying to contain whatever is out there, preying on families an average of 3 times a year. So now that we know about SCP-4666, what would happen if it were in fact real? Well, it really is hard to say. How do we know something like this isn't real? Given the fact that the SCP Foundation ensures the media's reports either never see the light of day or come off to sound completely fabricated, and the fact that they pretty much erase anyone's memory with knowledge of the incident, even if this did happen, we wouldn't know. Now, of course, SCP-4666 isn't real. We know that. But even if it were, it's not like this beast randomly goes after people on the streets. It's very meticulous. Everything is planned out, and unfortunately, if you're one of its targets, there really is no stopping it. However, you'd only be at risk if you lived in a house which included a family member under the age of 8 years old. With that in mind, areas known to be at risk of getting attacked may implement laws, or at least recommendations, for families who have children under the age of 8. Putting the children or entire families under protective custody is one option, although it seems next to impossible to really stop this thing from doing what it wants. Strands of hair as well as bite marks from SCP-4666 have also been tested, and it has been determined that this creature is not human. Although it may have some similar characteristics to that of a human, regardless of whatever SCP-4666 is, one thing is for sure, it is definitely not human. Could it be an extraterrestrial being? A science experiment gone wrong? Who knows really? Until we find out where this thing came from and what, if any, vulnerabilities it may have, we may never be able to stop it. But as previously mentioned, only those who have fallen victim to the attacks would know of its existence, aside from the SCP Foundation, of course. And even those who find themselves unlucky enough to be targeted by SCP-4666, yet somehow survive, would have their memories completely erased. Which means, really, only those in the SCP Foundation studying this creature would ever know of its existence and what it's capable of. So to wrap up, even if SCP-4666 existed, which, who knows, maybe it does, we would have no idea. and that's what makes this one such an interesting case. Not only is there no telling if you would potentially be at risk of an attack, you wouldn't even know this thing existed in the first place. After a while, people may start to catch on that there is a child predator specifically targeting young children. Given that most of these scenarios would end up with a young child missing or young children finding handcrafted toys made up of another children's remains on their beds, I think it's safe to say new families would ramp up their security around the house. Alarm systems, cameras, as well as barriers and fences of all sorts would most likely see an increase in worldwide sales. Other than that, not much would change, aside from the fact that of course the general public would be afraid of a serial killer who invades homes around Christmas time. But that seems to be an unfortunate reality already. Unless maybe it is SCP-4666. Normally the SCPs that we tend to cover are scary. I'm talking I don't ever want to see that thing or talk about it ever again scary. Yet today I feel the SCP we're about to discuss is actually the furthest thing from scary. In fact, it's almost a joke of sorts. With that being said, what this SCP is allegedly capable of, well, that's a whole different story. I don't understand it, and it seems no one really does. That's where the fear is, in the unknown. So what is SCP-513? Well, it's a rusty old bell. See, I told you guys, this one isn't scary in the slightest. It's just a bell. Who cares? But again, it's not the SCP itself that is scary, but what it's allegedly capable of. The badly corroded hunk of metal has no visible marks or engravings due to its poor condition. Attempts by the SCP to remove the rust chemically and mechanically have also been unsuccessful, and when the bell was found, a note was attached. The note read, "You've seen it, now he could hear you. You've touched it, now he could see you. Never ring it. If you hear it, he can touch you." The bell's clapper was also heavily taped to the inside of the bell, obviously to stop it from ringing. So it's clear that ringing this bell is what activates it, for lack of a better word, and is the only way this SCP can be effective. Due to this, SCP-513 is contained in a 1 cubic meter block of gelatin, which is locked in a soundproof, climate-controlled cell. The SCP Foundation inspects the gelatin cube daily to make sure it is fully intact and not degrading by any means. If for whatever reason the cube has any cuts, tears, spills, or rips, SCP-513 is to then be removed from the cube and placed in another cube surgically placed by deaf SCP employees. So as you can see, it's clear that hearing this SCP will lead to a bad series of events. And now let's explore those events. Upon hearing any noise produced by SCP-513, you will start experiencing severe anxiety. Those exposed to said sound have reported feelings of being watched by an unseen entity and having an elevated heart rate and blood pressure. Approximately an hour after first hearing the sound, victims will start to catch a glimpse of SCP-513-1 when opening doors, walking by mirrors, even turning their heads. Really any action that would suddenly change your perception is when victims tend to get a glimpse of this creature. Upon being seen, SCP-513-1 reportedly turns and runs away, ultimately disappearing without a trace. It's also been determined this creature is invisible to those who haven't been exposed to the sounds of SCP-513. Sightings of this creature tend to reoccur every 14 to 237 minutes. The victims who are being stalked end up becoming extremely sleep deprived as they can sense when SCP-513-1 is in their presence and see it. Those capable of falling asleep before this creature's appearance report being physically attacked by it. Upon waking up, they see the creature run away as per usual. Aside from the sleep deprivation, victims also tend to suffer from paranoia, aggression, hypervigilance, and depression. Every person who has fallen victim to this SCP, with the exception of one, have committed suicide. Descriptions of SCP-513-1's appearance are unreliable due to the fact that victims are sleep deprived, physically and mentally exhausted. However, what has been consistent across all accounts is that this creature seems to be a tall, thin, lanky humanoid with large hands. So now you could probably see why I was saying that SCP-513 itself isn't scary, but what it's capable of certainly is. In a nutshell, it's a bell that can drive people to suicide if they hear it ring. So now that we know what it is, what happens if it's real? Fortunately for us, not all that much. Unlike a lot of other SCPs that we've covered, this thing can't move. It's an object that only affects those who hear it. And if the SCP were able to contain it in a soundproof area, then it wouldn't be a danger to anyone at all. In fact, we wouldn't even know of its existence. However, it's unclear where the bell came from in the first place, how long it's been around, and what its original purpose was. If this was the Liberty Bell or Big Ben in London, then it would affect millions of people before eventually being stopped. But if it's just a bell that was made and somehow has the ability to summon this evil entity that stalks victims to the point of suicide, well, I mean, it's still messed up, but it wouldn't have an effect on a global scale the way we think it would. But to stop this SCP, someone would have needed to survive and not commit suicide, which was the case with one victim. No information on that victim has been released, but essentially if this SCP were real, it probably wouldn't kill that many people. After the first few deaths and the consistencies with people saying they fear some unknown and unseen creature, we'd eventually put 2 and 2 together and realize the bell has some sort of effect over people. Is it an actual creature they see, or are they just mentally so distraught that their mind is starting to see things and hallucinate? Most likely the latter. The why would be the toughest part. Try and understand how the sound of a bell can drive someone to a point that they go absolutely crazy. That answer we may never find, but eventually we would either destroy the bell, and if it's deemed indestructible, just keep it in a soundproof box, or even throw it to the bottom of the ocean. But I have a hard time believing we would come across such an interesting find and then toss it in the ocean as a way to get rid of the problem. We'd want to figure out what it is about the sound the bell makes that drives people insane. And if it actually did somehow summon this evil creature known as SCP-513-1, then what does that mean? Is this bell some sort of summoning device that can bring aliens or evil spirits into the real world? Again, a lot of question marks and a lot of time and money spent trying to understand and make sense of the powers this rusty bell apparently has. And considering how it's a cowbell, well, I don't think it can make noises that would travel too far either. So the idea that this could have been the Liberty Bell or Big Ben simply goes out the window. This bell is tiny, so even if it were real, it wouldn't be much of a danger considering how it's probably the size of my hand. So to wrap up, if SCP-513 were real, what would happen? Well, a few people would die. We'd eventually realize it's this bell that somehow drives people to suicide, or possibly awakens some sort of evil spirit that haunts those who hear the bells ring. We'd study it and try to understand it, then lock it away for good so it can't hurt anyone else. Eventually, Hollywood would make a horrible movie based on the series of events that took place regarding this SCP, and it would most likely flop. It'd be one of those movies you watch on Netflix for a cheap scare and then never think about again. And the story of SCP-513 would be lost and forgotten forever, until it somehow was found again and released to wreak havoc once more. And if we're lucky, we may even get a sequel to that Hollywood flick.
I've got a hypothetical question for all you before I try to answer our titular query. What makes a god? Do they have to create worlds? Must they have domain over reality? How much influence do they need over the world around them in order to be considered as such? What's the difference between a minor deity and a major one? All big questions, all of which need to be kept in mind while discussing today's SCP. Hello fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we are tackling a question of potentially biblical proportions. What if SCP-343 was real? If we're going to answer our main question, first we have to know exactly what SCP-343 is, and for that we'll go way back to the early days of the SCP Wiki. 343 has been around a long time and is referenced in a plethora of entries and tales across the SCP universe. The influence and cross-reference popularity is undeniable, so get used to him being around. He can be best described as a male humanoid whose appearance changes depending on who looks at him. It seems that this is tied to the beliefs of the beholder, having him appear as whatever deity they believe in. Currently this fellow is under Foundation custody, but only because he wants to be. As it stands right now, 343 is totally uncontainable. This is likely due to the fact that he claims to be God and can really do whatever he wants. Like, he literally claimed outright to be the creator of the universe. To prove this to researchers, 343 walked right out of containment and returned moments later with a burger. In addition to other shows of power, his cell is now fully furnished, crackling fireplace and all. Nobody knows how it came to be that way. As odd as this all may seem, especially the willing confinement bit, the artist formerly known as God actually seems to be a positive influence on the Foundation site he's at. He enjoys speaking with people and often encourages folks to visit him. Armed with the knowledge of all topics, 343 consistently improves the mood of visitors and keeps morale high among staff. This happens often, even when security has been ordered by Foundation supervisors to keep visitors away. The guards assigned to 343 are usually very lax, letting people through with reasoning that usually boils down to, you know he likes company. Who are they to deny a god a few friendly chats per day? Why would God just hang out at the Foundation though? Why isn't he actively helping folks keep SCPs contained? What's really going on here? There's no real answers to any of the above questions, but there is more information that might clarify some points for y'all out there at home. The main addition to make here concerns an addendum added to the current containment procedures. You see, even though this entity is 100% uncontainable, he only warrants a safe rating. If anything else were to be so difficult to contain, it would definitely earn a Keter classification, which seems a little fishy, right? Well, back to that addendum I mentioned a second ago, there seems to be a major gap in some of the documentation concerning 343. The records that would usually be kept in the file are not available, and the doctor presiding over the original report seems to never have existed. It's like he was just plucked from the world and placed somewhere else. No staff seem to remember anything about the Doctor, even though little tidbits of information are still around if you look. In a heavily redacted and corrupted file, it's possible to piece together a tale of a Doctor attempting to disprove the god in their confinement cell. The Doctor in question was suspicious of 343's motives and what the visitors were up to when they were in his cell. After some snooping and digging, the Doctor resolved to confront the entity, but shortly after disappeared without a trace. Negative traces, considering the massive memory gap within all of his colleagues. So we've got an uncontrollable, uncontainable creature calling itself God, and it's only classified as safe. Something's up. A popular theory floating around postulates that 343 is not actual God, but instead a powerful reality bender with a god complex. Which lines up pretty well, right? Just hanging out, doing nothing, claiming all sorts of insane things but being able to back them up, shifting into different images based on the beliefs of his visitors, inviting people to chat while also showing off how godly he truly is. Plus, the disappearance of a suspicious Doctor and the strangely lenient classification lead people to believe that this reality bender thought the Doctor was getting too close to the truth and as such took care of him. It's not too far-fetched. However, this brings up another conundrum. If someone can bend reality to their will, who's to say they aren't God? Even if this individual didn't create our universe, he seemingly has the power to tear it down and create whatever he wants. Potentially only on a small scale, sure, but the reality bending qualities of this lad make me wonder how far he could take it. If he can't totally reorganize our universe, maybe he can create a smaller one and rule over that instead. That kind of power makes them a god in some regard, right? What do you think of this conundrum? Could a person with reality bending powers change the world in such a way that they become God? Ponder that while I bring us back to the original question. What if SCP-343 was real? We can think about it in two ways. One, take 343 at his word and accept that he is the creator of the universe. If that's the case, not much would change. He would continue to hang out in his plush Foundation containment cell and shoot the breeze with all sorts of agents and researchers and doctors. Maybe he'd change something every once in a while, maybe not. He seems to be pretty contented to let the world be and just live in it for a while. The second option is to see him as a reality bender with a big head and be very, very afraid. The thing about people with too much power is that they tend to very much dislike it when somebody questions it. By making this video, I am openly confronting 343, calling him a fraud. If that's the case, I guess I'll just disappear like the Doctor. 3, 2, 1? Huh. Maybe he's more chill than I imagined. Even so, that much unchecked power isn't a good thing. He could make massive changes to our world and pass it off as the way reality has always been. We're all essentially playthings, waiting to be manipulated, put into different scenarios based on his will. Every once in a while, somebody might notice an odd occurrence too, kinda like the Mandela effect, where people remember the same thing differently. It could be that the imperfect reality bending of a false god left behind some trace of the world from before. Fun way to explain away the Berenstein versus Berenstain Bears conundrum. I suppose there wouldn't be any way for us to know any better regardless, except for those rare cracks in the veneer. So if 343 was real and was playing God and was goofing it up a little, we'd be in the same situation we are now. Not as world-altering as I originally expected. So what do you think? Is 343 actual God, or is he a reality bender playing God? Is there really any difference?
SCP-457 is a flame. Aside from causing minor burns, you probably wouldn't think it's capable of causing much harm or really being all that dangerous. But as you know, SCPs are contained for a reason, and it's usually because they would destroy the world if they weren't. Or at the very least be responsible for numerous casualties. And to no surprise, that is the case with this flame, aka SCP-457. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to LBQ. I'm your host, Jared Bronstein, and today we'll be answering the question, what if SCP-457 was real? As always, we'll start with its class and containment procedures. Interestingly enough, this specific SCP's class is Euclid, with the potential of it being Keter. Containment procedures require 457 to be kept in a 5 by 5 meter chamber with at least 9 inches of fireproof material around the chamber, as well as a blast-proof window to observe 457. The window is equipped with an emergency blast shield, and the opening of the chamber also has at least 2 temperature-controlled airtight chambers that are to be sealed in case of emergency. The main chamber is to be kept at a high humidity, with misting sprinklers consistently turned on and a drain on the floor. There are also emergency hoses which need to have a minimum of 300 psi of water pressure, and a small structure on the wall that is kept dry at all times, which allows 457 to remain in its form and gives it minimal protection. Anyone who enters the chamber is required to wear at least Class A temperature-controlled flame-retardant sealed suits and enter in groups of 3, with 2 people equipped with emergency fire extinguishers as well as high-grade blast shields in case of emergency. Personnel should only enter the chamber to repair any damage to the chamber or sprinklers, or to supply 457 with its daily fuel material. If for any reason 457 is to get hostile with those in its chamber, personnel are authorized to use emergency extinguishers and hoses until it retreats. Should 457 break containment, emergency sprinkler systems will be activated and everyone will be supplied with extinguishers and blast shields. So what exactly is this thing aside from dangerous? Well, it appears to be a flame. 457's actual composition is unknown, and it appears to be undetectable and can even go invisible at times. When given enough fuel, 457 will take the shape of a human, although it appears its most natural form is simply a flame the size of a lit match. Well, in this form, 457 appears to be like any other flame you'd find on a match. However, it appears to have the ability to jump to more flammable materials or flames to increase its size. As the flame grows, it is able to assume more complex shapes, which also appears to increase the being's intelligence. Although it's unclear how this flame gains the knowledge it does, when 457 is able to reach human size, it tends to appear to be a human covered in flames. 457 can communicate by writing letters out in its own flame, burning words into the wall, and occasionally through speech at a certain size which is currently unknown. 457 will split into separate beings, and this trend will continue if the beings continue to grow large by finding new fuel sources. That being said, it appears multiple beings of 457 are aggressive toward each other, attempting to either consume or extinguish each other, especially if there is a limited fuel source. It seems 457's only goal is to acquire large sources of fuel to expand its size and spread. The danger here is as 457 gets larger, it gets more intelligent, allowing it to learn new things and mimic behaviors. In the past, 457 has actually purposely damaged and broke some of the sprinkler systems in its chamber, and occasionally has set up complex traps. 457 has also attempted to trick personnel into providing it with more fuel, and due to how unique of a being 457 is, its psychology is impossible to understand. It's unknown how 457 initially formed, but was found in 2007 in a classified area, and was responsible for starting multiple wildfires. An addendum on the SCP website depicts an aggressive 457 speaking with a classified doctor. After multiple attempts of asking 457 to step away from the glass window, 457 then started moving around its chamber looking for a way out. Eventually, it damaged the sprinkler system and destroyed a portion of its fuel injector, giving it access to gallons of gasoline. An explosion went off, and this information was gathered from security footage. 457 has since been moved to a higher security chamber. So as you can see, 457 is quite an interesting one. So what happens if it's real? Well, I think it's safe to say a lot of things would burn. It appears this flame is next to impossible to put out, and as it grows larger and consumes more fuel or flammable material, it becomes more intelligent, which in turn makes it more dangerous. It's unclear at what size this thing separates, but when it does, the two flame-like beings try to take each other down anyway, so it's not like we'd have to deal with an army of fire people. That being said, having a flame that grows in size and intelligence is still quite scary. It clearly has the ability to start wildfires, which is incredibly dangerous and potentially deadly. It's unclear where this thing was located and how it would do in colder temperatures, such as a Canadian winter. Odds are it wouldn't last, meaning the flame would most likely want to be somewhere with a consistently warm temperature and very little precipitation. Regardless of where this thing would live, it would consistently be trying to expand, which would mean fires would be at an all-time high. As previously mentioned, this thing was originally found to be the cause of wildfires, so it's more likely than not it decides to live somewhere with tons of trees or anything flammable. My best guess would be maybe the Amazon, as there is a ton of real estate there. Unfortunately, we already had issues with the Amazon burning down, and more recently with Australia, so we know how detrimental fires can be. So if 457 was real and wasn't already contained, we'd be in serious trouble. People would lose their belongings and possibly their lives, animals would certainly be affected, and the world itself wouldn't appreciate the pollution the burning trees would emit. Unfortunately, I find it incredibly unlikely that we determine a composition of a flame is responsible for all this, which means things may burn until there is nothing left. Even with our best efforts to put out the fires, which we'd be able to manage, upon realizing the fire is impossible to put out, even on a small scale, would still stump us. There is the possibility we try to hose 457 while it spreads, which would have it react in an aggressive and hostile manner. Upon realizing this, we may try to capture it to study it, which could also lead to some serious issues. Considering how 457 is manipulative and gains intelligence with size, who knows how much damage it could do to researchers and scientists trying to study it. Ultimately, it's unclear how we'd be able to stop this thing. Maybe hosing it down or using fire extinguishers would kill it, for lack of a better word, but it's unclear if there is any concrete way to completely get rid of this being. Which means, eventually, this thing may just burn down our world. And there you have it for what if SCP-457 was real.
Listen closely, children. This is for your own good. Traveling from dimension to dimension, meeting all sorts of crazy creatures, adventuring in far-off undiscovered worlds. Sounds like the life, doesn't it? Who wouldn't want to see things that no other human could possibly see? Well, it sounds good on paper, or in digital format, but imagine being thrown into it unprepared. Then the adventures get less epic and more terrifyingly deadly. Just another day in the life of a man who can't control when he shifts through dimensions. Hello fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we're staring down the barrel of an intergalactic gun while asking this crazy question. What if SCP-507 was real? So who is SCP-507? It's not a monster or an anomalous object, it's a pretty average man. A regular, slightly pudgy dude with blonde hair and green eyes. He likes to make people give him nicknames and then enforce the use of said nicknames. As of right now, he's been called Tommy, Steve, Bruto, Guy, Houdini, and Grabnock the Destroyer. Let me know what you would call him down in the comments. 507, bless his soul, has this quirk about him where he shifts in and out of our reality with no control over when it happens or where it takes him. It often happens at super inconvenient times too, like when he's mid-sentence, sleeping, or making use of the facilities. When he shifts, it takes him to the exact place that he's in our universe, but in the alternate universe. The dimensions he heads to change at random, although he has ended up in a few dimensions multiple times. After being taken into Foundation custody, our pal Tommy made some requests. In exchange for reporting back on what he saw in other worlds, the Foundation must consider any and all equipment requests he makes. Not all of them are approved, but over time he put together a kit including a flashlight, a pistol loaded with rubber bullets, a knife, antifungal agent, sunscreen, an oxygen tank, and more. Considering the wide range of possible events he could be thrown into at any moment, I get it. He's kind of like Morty, but without Rick as a guide, and with absolutely no idea when he'll be tossed into another reality. Actually, that last point is true for Morty too. Part of his shifting abilities means that anything he's in physical contact with will be brought with him to wherever he goes. This has resulted in him bringing corpses back to the Foundation site, among other things. These are very useful for research purposes, but Grabnock the Destroyer never seems to be too happy about these developments. And to round out my little description of Bruto, I'll briefly explain some of my favorite exploits of his. One recurring shift involves a dark room with the sound of heavy breathing nearby. He couldn't see anything on his first trip, so Houdini requested a flashlight. On his return trip sometime later, the flashlight revealed the source of the breathing, a man in dark sunglasses and a suit smiling way too wide. This prompted Guy to fill him with rubber bullets and run screaming. A third trip to this place revealed that the smiling man was oozing brown liquid, trying to hand him a human heart, obviously upset that he was riddled with rubber bullets. Steve does not want to go back there. Another trip brought Bluebeard to a place where the plants constantly screamed for 4 days. Upon returning to the Foundation site, he made one request: a hug. This was granted. Kurt here also lost his left hand during a trip after being taken in, fattened up, and brought to the kitchen by a race of humanoids with fangs. Cartoon worlds, places of immeasurable beauty, fantasy universes with dragons, 507 has seen it all. And he's still a bit of a goof. He hasn't developed the quiet confidence of a world traveler because he's never quite sure what's going on. Love him to death though, the poor lad. The Foundation, being the shadowy weirdos they are, haven't been completely honest with Tommy. In fact, one time while the main Tommy was off gallivanting in some unknown zone, 2 more Tommies manifested in the Foundation site where he's usually held. After a quick interrogation, one demanifested, leaving the other behind. They both tried to pass themselves off as the real 507, but a difference in presidential assassination trivia between the 2 worlds gave away his true identity. The Foundation proceeded to chop this alternative Grabnock into tiny little pieces, only to find out that they will shift along with the rest of the body. Freaky! So now we know who 507 is. A dimension traveler with no control over anything. Fun. So what would happen if he was real though? I think our dear sweet Bruto would be a celebrity. Maybe not a major one, but definitely one of some notoriety. He'd be absolutely fascinating, being able to pop in and out of existence, carrying crazy stuff, telling insane stories. A hoot, I tell ya. Sure, it'd be weird to have him pop in and out during a guest appearance somewhere, but people would still love it. He could bring back oddities from all other universes and show them off for a small fee. Or he could even write stories about his travels, which could be marketed as sci-fi or non-fiction. dimension. The possibilities are as endless as the number of universes he's able to visit. Once he gets famous enough, people would want to make movies about his exploits, TV shows, podcasts. His adventures will be the adventures that entertain the world. They're exciting and new and 100% irrefutably real. Although he might have some detractors as well, considering that nobody can really see what he's up to other than him. But the evidence he can bring back would definitely lend some legitimacy to his tales. Plus, they'd probably be worth a whole bunch of money. Imagine that. Collectors of the rare items young guy brings home. I could see it. He'd probably start making trips just to come back with armloads of baubles. After getting famous, he might as well get rich quick too. Hell, the pudgy fella might even get jacked, because apparently that's what people do when they get famous. All of this could prove to be moderately dangerous though, because if at any point he's in contact with some wild disease from another dimension or an ancient bloodthirsty beast, then they'll pop up in our world. Depending on our level of preparedness, this could end up pretty messily. But hey, that's what the Foundation is for, right? Although I guess they'd just be containing him if that were the case, so none of the above would be possible. But hey, it's fun to dream, right? The last thing I'll say is that he'd honestly likely be dead if he were real. In the fictional wiki universe 507 exists in, he's obviously very lucky. Too lucky, as he seems to survive everything and anything. That kind of luck just doesn't exist in the real world. Close calls rarely happen twice, and he'd probably be crushed under a giant purple elephant or something. What can you do? It was fun while it lasted. So what do you think? Have you read the extended test log from 507? Which of his adventures is your favorite? Would you buy an artifact from another universe?
Humanity's overrated anyways. Bring on the catastrophic internet monsters. And if you're at all familiar with the world of SCPs, you probably know that a whole lot of them could do a ton of damage if given the opportunity. That's why the Foundation does so much to keep them contained. Considering that there are so many K-class scenarios, it's a wonder we haven't succumbed to any of them yet. End of the world, class restructuring, dominance shifts. One is bound to happen eventually. Until then though, we'll enjoy ourselves by running down a list of SCPs that could just absolutely end us all. Hello fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we're going to be counting down the top 10 scary SCPs that could end humanity. Kicking us off at number 10, we've got SCP-610. We'll start today's list off with a big fleshy mass of terror. If you're familiar with Sarkic cults, you'll know this one very well. The flesh that hates is a horrific meat disease that turns people into shambling, unthinking raw flesh. Essentially, anyone infected by the Red Death will have their scar tissue grow at an insane rate and take over their human features. Infected folks will sprout additional limbs and branch out in disgusting Carpenterian ways. Think The Thing, but redder. As people transform more rapidly, they'll feel the need to find more people to infect, spreading the flesh further. Right now, it's mostly localized to some remote villages in Russia, but if it made it to major population centers, we'd be assimilated in no time. Coming in at number 9, we've got SCP-871. After discussing raw disease meat, let's consider a more delicious end of the world. There isn't much out there more appetizing than cake, right? It comes in so many varieties, flavor, consistency, temperature, toppings, the works. Everybody likes cake, and test subjects at Aperture Science prove how seductive it is too. But what if there was too much cake? Hard to imagine, I know, but hear me out. There are 237 cakes being contained by the Foundation right now. These cakes are all subject to the power of 871, meaning that if they are destroyed by any method other than human consumption, they will duplicate. And if they're not eaten daily, they will duplicate anyways. If 237 cakes are not consumed in their entirety every day, they could become exponentially self-replicating. And if left unchecked, the whole world could be drowned in cake. It's a fun idea until you find yourself facing down a mile-high mountain of cake ready to topple your hometown. Coming in at number 8, we've got SCP-3199. Speaking of infinitely self-replicating foodstuffs that can end humanity, let's talk 3199. These strange beings resembling chicken-chimp hybrids, sort of. These 3-meter monsters weigh upwards of 700 kilograms each and are able to produce offspring pretty much without limit. They can fire off eggs like nobody's business, and they hatch rather quickly. Plus, the eggs are nigh indestructible. Extreme blunt force trauma, extensive pressure, precision blades, and acid exposure have all been found to be ineffective at destroying these ovids. All instances of 3199 are born with another egg ready to go too, so we could see humanity ended via overpopulation in no time. And seeing that they're opportunistic hunters that love to liquefy their human prey, it might not be a lack of resources that does us in. Coming in at number 7, we've got SCP-736. We are going to take our destruction to space now. Let's be real, if something greater than us wanted to end humanity, we really couldn't do anything to stop it. Heck, a bunch of extinction plots could already be in motion. 736 is a prime example of our helplessness. It seems that something is out there playing pool with planets attempting to smash into Earth. There's an anomaly affecting one of Saturn's moons, constantly altering its orbit before returning it to its original position. Current models appear to show that the anomaly is attempting to cause a chain reaction that will eventually have Titan slam into Earth. I don't know if I need to say this, but I will anyways. That would be very bad for anyone living on Earth. So for now, we should try to live life as best we can, because you would never know when an unidentified anomaly might play trick shots with our lives. Coming in at number 6, we've got SCP-682. While I don't believe that the hard-to-kill lizard is as inherently dangerous as many of the other options on this list, I do believe that it makes up for this with pure hatred. 682 just wants to kill everything. It hates life. Anything living deserves to die, or at least that's what it says. Pair that hatred with insane regenerative abilities and an impressive amount of combat acumen, and you've got a beast that could end humanity if given the opportunity. If the Foundation hasn't been able to find a way to kill it at this point, what makes you think the average human might come up with something? If given free reign, it would methodically travel the world, killing every last one of us. It might take a long time, but eventually I believe that 682 would get it done. He just hates people that much. I'm sure some of you can relate. Coming in at number 5, we've got SCP-096. At this point, I feel like 096 is an SCP mascot. Every entry-level article and fan seem to reference it as a personal favorite. It's a scary idea for sure, a creepy pale humanoid that will run to the ends of the earth to kill anyone who has seen its face. There's no reasoning with it, and there's no taking it back once you've seen an image of it. Accept your fate and get demolished. The Foundation has done a pretty good job of keeping it under wraps so far, and most settings are pretty remote and isolated. However, if 096 made it into a major city, we'd all be cooked. All sorts of people would see it running around, and as a result would be marked for death. And there's no way that it wouldn't be photographed and shared via newscasts and social media, meaning that anyone who tunes in would also be marked for death. After that, it's only a matter of time before 096 makes it around the world, blasting through people like the Kool-Aid Man blasts through walls. Coming in at number 4, we've got SCP-1000. You ever get that feeling that you're being watched? Well, it might have been a Bigfoot peering in from the shadows. See, SCP-1000 is a species of humanoid that plenty of folks have claimed to see wandering around forested areas. Most think it's a hoax, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, etc. The Foundation's official story is that it's a species with human origins, but will also kill you if you look at it. But that story is also a cover-up, meant to keep people away from the truth. If you've got the right clearance, you might be able to read up on the origin of SCP-1000. Apparently they used to be the apex predator, topping the food chain around the world. Humans seem to be on the way out, totally dominated by these impressive apes. But out of nowhere, a dominance shift occurred, putting humans back on top. How and why aren't well known, but it seems that there are still some big feet out there waiting for their chance to take their rightful place. Another shift in power might be closer than we think. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-231, the Scarlet King, the big bad, the ultimate evil, a powerful being dead set on destroying the world. Be thankful that it's trapped, for now. There are so many theories surrounding the Scarlet King, so it's hard to say exactly what it is or what it does. But if we're going to take 231 as gospel, we should continue doing some crazy rituals in order to keep our world together. Apparently there's a procedure named after a location in New York that needs to be followed to a T, lest we release untold evils onto the world. Witnesses attest to the insane cruelty and pain involved in the procedure, which involves a young girl apparently hosting the Scarlet King. But as the old adage goes, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-2747. This phenomenon causes people to talk and write about non-existent works of fiction, or that's what people thought at first. All sorts of details from said unfiction begin to appear all over the place, with no explanation as to where they came from. Nobody had any recollection of these ever existing. Soon, Foundation members started to postulate that these stories were real at some point, but were somehow erased from existence. It then became apparent that these erasures were imperfect and left behind little bits and pieces of the story. These eventually became anti-narratives, sets of tropes and symbols that when put together make a story erase itself. And when these elements are included in meta-narratives, or stories within stories, they eventually cause the parent stories to be erased too. This is especially bad news when you realize that bits and pieces are missing from the containment procedures. It seems that soon 2747 will erase itself, which will leave a hole in the Foundation wiki, which could then conceivably erase itself, which would leave a hole in the world containing the wiki, which is our world. Uh-oh. And finally at number 1, When Day Breaks. One of many proposals concerning SCP-001, when day breaks, is one of the bleakest. Something strange happens to the sun, after which every living thing touched by its rays turns into melty, gelatinous stuff. The beings affected are still alive, but they're different. When day breaks predicts an apocalypse made out of goo. If you go outside, you become an abomination. If you open a window, you become an abomination. If you're captured by one of the weird greasy beings, then they'll turn you into one too. Humanity is gone when day breaks. All that's left is the unknown. Well, doesn't that make you feel warm and fuzzy? 10 different ways we could all die, or do something similar to dying. What'd you think of the list? What humanity-mucking SCPs would you have chosen? Are all of these as dangerous as I made them out to be?